I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: is new atheism irrational? Now, the reason I'm asking that question is because I believe that at its heart, new atheism has a very, very serious problem with rationality. And that's obviously kind of ironic because of the fact that new atheism, one of its core doctrines, is this idea that has this sort of unwavering, unflinching commitment to sort of pure rationality, and that we shouldn't allow other things to get in the way of rationality, and rationality actually ruling the day. And one of the core doctrines that goes along with this idea that's very central to the new atheist movement, and in particular those more vociferous sort of voices that you hear online from this particular community, is this idea that religion is toxic. It is poisonous. There is nothing good about religion. It is inherently bad. That the world is worse because of religion. If we destroyed and got rid of religious beliefs and the supposed outdated superstitions, we'd be much better off. The world would be a better place. It would be more rational. It would be more enlightened. As the book title by the late Christopher Hitchens says, God is not great. How religion poisons everything. It's the central tenet of new atheism, but it's false. It's a false doctrine. It's false, and it's very easy to prove that this is a false doctrine because we can cite lots of examples which show that there is important secular utility in religion, that the world has actually gleaned and gained important insights and important advances and things that actually benefit and help us as a society from religion. I think this is why Jordan Peterson has now come under such vicious attack by a lot of members, particularly the online skeptic and new atheist community, why they've targeted Jordan Peterson so harshly. And what they tend to do is they don't actually engage with the arguments and the evidence he puts forward. Instead, what they tend to do is they either strawman a lot of his work, or they engage in just regular ad hominem character assassinations and then sort of try and suggest that they don't actually have to engage with what he's saying. The problem is, of course, that Jordan Peterson, and the reason he's such a thorn in the side for new atheists in that particular community and their groupthink, is like I said, he proves one of their core doctrines to be false. Jordan Peterson shows how there is actually secular utility in religious belief. Now, Jordan Peterson is not the first person or the only person to do this, but in the modern context, he is certainly someone who has cut through all the sort of popular hype, and he is very much at a popular consciousness level raised awareness amongst a lot of people, and I'm talking about people who are not religious believers here, that there is in fact secular utility in religion, and it is completely irrational to claim otherwise. Like I said, we can actually show lots of examples which easily prove how ignorant it is to claim that religion poisons everything and that we'd be better off without it. I mean, all you have to do is cite a couple of examples of where religion has actually benefited the world and brings that secular utility to show that that's a false claim. But we can cite lots of examples, and these examples exist at an individual level, and they also exist at a societal-wide level. So, for example, the fact that we now consider infanticide, the act of killing infants, to be a morally abhorrent practice, and we don't do this. This is something, a moral intuition and a way of living and structuring our society where we respect the rights and the well-being of children. We don't just treat them as chattel who can be disposed of at will by their parents. That came about as a direct result of Christianity. It's religious belief that brought that important piece of advancement to our world. In the ancient world, it wasn't that way. It's Christianity that reshapes what was a very, very common practice prior to Christianity, the act of infanticide. And so we often take that for granted. And if you don't know much about your history, you probably miss that important point. That's just one example where religion didn't actually poison the world. It made it a lot better. It made it a lot better for children. Our concept of human rights. One of the sort of fundamental and essential tenets of our framework of human rights is the idea of moral equality between persons, the idea that all persons should be treated as equal, that you don't make distinctions based on like arbitrary criteria such as ethnicity or a person's gender or their social status. You can't just say, well, we're not going to give you human rights, or because we happen to think that you're not as valuable as the rest of us, or we think that we're more important than you are based on your gender or your ethnicity. Now, that idea is central to human rights, and to the framework of human rights that we all just sort of take for granted, but absolutely wouldn't be without. But here's the thing. That's not how the ancient world thought about the human person. It's Christianity that begins the societal shift away from this idea that there is actually moral inequality between persons and that some persons are not created or born equal with others. It's Christianity that completely turns that on its head. We can go right back to the very early doctrines, the very early days of Christianity. Paul, who was one of the important theologians and the important thinkers and teachers in the early Christian movement, he writes a letter to a group of Christians in a place called Galatia, and he says to them in that letter, he's teaching them here what Christians believe, and he says to them in that letter that because of Jesus and what Jesus taught us, we don't have distinctions now between men and women, between Jews and Gentiles, between slave or free. All are equal. In other words, what he's saying here is that every person has moral equality regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of social status. And this is something that he's getting directly from Jesus, the founder of Christianity. Another example of this is found in another one of the early Christian teachers, a guy by the name of James, and he wrote a letter to a group of Christians in which he expels the exact same sort of idea when he says this, and I'll read it to you now. My brothers, do not try to combine faith in Jesus with the making of distinction between classes of people. Now, suppose a man comes into your synagogue beautifully dressed and with a gold ring on, and at the same time a poor man comes in shabby clothes, and you take notice of the well-dressed man and say, come this way to the best seats. Then you tell the poor man, stand over there, or you can sit on the floor by my footrest. Can't you see that you have used two different standards in your mind and turned yourselves into judges, and corrupt judges at that? So here again is this idea of moral equality between persons. You don't make these arbitrary distinctions. People are equal. And this human equality becomes the bedrock of Christian community and then spreads out through Western society. Now that idea comes to us as a direct result of the Christian religion. And this Christian religion, or this doctrine from the Christian religion, is built on this notion that every single human person, regardless of who they are or where they are or how old they are, etc., is an image of God. They are made in the image of God. And so they have profound worth. They have equal dignity. That dignity and worth is not given to you by your parents. It's not given to you by the state. It's yours by virtue of your nature and the fact that you, according to Christianity, are made in the image of God. Now, that is the bedrock, that is the seedbed, that is the genesis, the foundation point at which human equality and the flow-on ideas and constructs that we have in our society around human rights, they become inevitable from that point. That's an example of a very profound and importantly good advancement that religion has brought to the world. So this idea that religion is toxic and poisons everything is just irrational. But it's not just those big society-wide things, and we can point to lots of those. We can also look at the one-on-one examples, the more personal examples. So, for example, we can look at the life of the Christian minister, religious minister Maximilian Kolbe. Maximilian Kolbe is arrested by the Nazis in Poland. He's hiding Jews in his religious institutions. He's arrested and he's put in the Auschwitz concentration camp. And while he is there, 3 prisoners escape one night. And Maximilian Kolbe is brought out with all of the other prisoners the next morning into the yard, and the Nazi prison guards declare that as a punishment for this escape, they are going to randomly select 10 men, and they are going to kill those 10 men. They're going to starve them to death as punishment for these 3 other escapees. In other words, this is a severe warning, don't you dare do this again. Now, one of the men who is selected is a husband and a father. He's got kids. And Maximilian Kolbe steps forward and he says, don't take that man. He's a stranger to this guy, but he says, don't take that man, take me in his place. And he saves this man's life by stepping forward and sacrificing his very life for the good of that man. Now, what motivates Maximilian Kolbe to do this profound act of love that benefits not just the man, but also his family, is his Christian faith. It's purely his Christian faith which drives him and motivates him to do this thing. That's the thing that causes him to say, I must step forward because I must imitate my leader, Jesus, who I believe is the Messiah, and I must show self-sacrificial love for the world around me. I dare you to try and tell me and to construct some crazy sentiment, because it wouldn't be a sound argument, that what Maximilian Kolbe did there was toxic and poisonous to the world. That's absolute nonsense. We all know that I think we would all happily and very willingly live in a society where people voluntarily committed themselves to showing that level of commitment to every other member of their society. They were willing to actually sacrifice their own life for the sake of someone else. I think we'd all happily put our hand up and say, yeah, I'd actually quite like to live in that society. I think that would be a profoundly wondrous place to live. Now, it's never going to happen because human nature is human nature. But we all recognise the good in that. And what underpins that, what motivated that, what brought that good into existence in the world in that scenario in Auschwitz concentration camp that particular morning? Religious belief. It was Maximilian Kolbe's Christianity which motivated, which drove him so strongly to take that action. So the idea that religion is toxic and it poisons everything in the world is so irrational, it's absurd. In order to maintain that belief, you either have to be ignorant of the facts, so know nothing about all of the ways in which religion has actually benefited the world and the various secular utilities that you can point to in religious beliefs or that come into the world because of religious belief, or you have to be willingly ignoring that evidence, cherry-picking stuff, and not actually willing to engage with the truth on this matter. Now, at this point, a new atheist will usually say, oh, but I can name some awful and evil things that have been done by religious people. Sure, we can all do that. That's just human history. But I can also name for you some awful and evil and vile things that have been done by atheists as well. I can name you things that have been done by people in the name of atheistic regimes that are vile and evil. Some of them have killed tens of millions of people. Just brutal barbarism visited upon the world. That doesn't mean that every atheist is a brutal, barbaric person who wants to kill and maim the people around them, any more than a religious person who does something evil is proof that all religion is toxic and it poisons everything. What you've got there is a classic example of human nature, and particularly the vulnerabilities and the worst excesses and flaws in human nature making themselves felt in the world, irregardless of what a person's religious ideas might happen to be in any given scenario. Now, in my country and around the world, we've got examples, plenty of examples we can point to, of people who have amazing knowledge of science who have done evil things as well. Now, in my country, we had a scientist who murdered their spouse using their scientific knowledge to commit the act of murder. That's not proof that science is some evil thing and that science poisons everything and that all scientists are evil people. No, far from it. Again, all that shows is that human nature has some terrible excesses when it is left unchecked, and that it's really important that human nature is kept in check by our commitment, our willingness to live out virtue. And without that striving to live out virtue, if we allow ourselves to fall into those excesses, some very, very evil things can happen. Now, for me, as a rational theist, when I sit down and have a discussion with someone who's a rational atheist, and I've got plenty of rational atheists who are followers of mine on this channel, atheism is not the issue. In fact, when I was in Wellington a couple of months ago on a speaking engagement, I had a really enriching conversation. I had a coffee and spent, I think it was almost a good couple of hours with one of my subscribers who's an atheist. And we had a great conversation about all sorts of stuff. The thing was, we're both very rational people. Now, when I, as someone who is a rational religious believer, looks at these examples that you can point to which show the secular utility of religion in the world, I see that secular utility as a proof, as a pointer to the fact that there is a design of some kind here, that the reason this is beneficial is because we are made with a particular teleology, a particular end in mind, and that we flourish and we become more fully human and we experience human life to its fullest by following that design. And all of that to me points to the fact that there's a real object, a designer, a God who exists. And so for me, it's I guess a proof or a pointer to the existence of God. Now, a rational atheist, like I said, there's plenty of those who follow my channel, will say, well, no, I disagree. I think that it's just a random and happy quirk of evolution. It's just the way things are, and I see the secular utility there. I see the evolutionary benefits that we get from religious belief, but I just think that's a happy sort of random quirk. It's just chance. It doesn't mean anything greater than that. That is how two rational people who disagree on the philosophical question of is there a God or not, that's how they approach these issues. An irrational member of the new atheist community, what they will do is they will approach this issue and they will say, no, there is no secular utility at all from religion. Religion poisons everything. Religion is toxic, and the sooner we get rid of it, the better, more advanced and more enlightened we will be as a society. That's irrational. That is a completely irrational claim. So if you're going to be an atheist, by all means, be an atheist, but don't be an irrational atheist. Be an atheist who is rational about these things. Don't go trying to deny something that is easily provable, and that is the truth that religion brings secular utility into the world and has actually been beneficial for us. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on PayPal or Patreon. There's a link for both in the description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.